Good Shabbos. Let's start with a melody. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. The second part has words. You know these words. Ma tovu, but a different melody. Ma tovu halecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu halecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ma tovu halecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael ma tovu halecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ma tovu, how beautiful, O Alecha Yaakov, the households of Jacob, mishkanotecha Yisrael, the dwelling places of Israel. Each one of you is bringing your ohel, your mishkan, into Eretz Shul, and Eretz Shul is coming into your ohel, your mishkan. So the shul and homes are becoming a merged reality, a merged household. How beautiful it is. And that's a way of looking at a negative and transforming it into a positive. Of course, being distant is difficult, but to know that we have dozens and more people joining us on Shabbos and that our homes are being merged with the shul, that's uplift. We'll begin putting on the talit. If you have a talit, it's traditional to recite the blessing, and we'll start with the Birchot HaShachar. The blessing is Lehit Atef B'tzitzit. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu Lehit Atef B'tzitzit. We're invited to rise as we begin with the Birchot HaShachar found in the Siddur on pages 103 and 104, pages 103 and 104 in the Siddur. Birchot means literally brachas of. Birchot HaShachar means brachas of the early morning. Shachar is the Hebrew word for early morning, and now you understand why the Hebrew word for the morning service is shacharit or shachris, pages 103 and 104 in the Siddur. And perhaps you at home have a Lev Shalem, and I hope so. And if you don't yet have a Lev Shalem, contact me and we'll help you acquire one. But it's become apparent that at least for a medium term, I don't know exactly how long, a medium term will be live streaming and you'll be in your homes. So it's appropriate for you to have a Siddur of your own in your home. And again, we're on page 103 and then 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'ivina lahavchin ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Top of 104. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamoyim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asa likol tzarki. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael betifara. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layoef koach. And the next line is traditionally recited silently in a whisper, and I don't know why, but I have a theory. So first let's look at the English. The next to last line, which is found in the English, just above the red transliteration, blessed are you God who gives strength to the weary, that's hanoten layoef koach. And so collectively, we're all waking up, it's early morning, we're getting started, we're a little sleepy, we need to get started. And blessed are you God who gives strength to the weary. Then the next one, instead of collective, is individual. And I've always enjoyed this. I found it fascinating. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of time and space, who literally removes the sleep and the slumber from our eyes. And in Hebrew, it's the same word as we say English, I've got to wake up, I've got to wipe the sleep away. And something as inconsequential, as minuscule as just wiping away the sleep from one's eyes and then starting the day is in some way connecting us to the creator of universes beyond counting. Even in the most minuscule, almost trivial of acts, you and I, if we so choose, can see a connection between ourselves and God. To start our awakening with a very small, hardly noticeable physical act. It's personal, not just individual, but it's personal. And I wonder, maybe that's why this blessing is recited in a whisper, because the prior blessing is much more collective and embracing. And so typically we now have a moment of silence, and we'll conclude at the very bottom of page 104. Unenu hayom uv'chol yom l'cheinu chesed rachamim b'necha v'nei choruenu v'tigulenu chasadim tovim baruch Adonai gomel chesed mo Yisrael. And we are seated, turning to the Psalm for Shabbat on page 112. Page 112. Mizmor shir liyom ha-Shabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, alei asor v'alei navel, alei higayon bechinot. Mizmor shir liyom ha-Shabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Ki simachtan Adonai b'foalecha, b'masei yodecha aranen, magalu masecha Adonai ma'od, amakum machshavotecha. Mizmor shir liyom ha-Shabbat, tov lodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. The arrogant do not understand. The fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. And let's stop there. Who would be an enemy of God? Who would try to beat up God? Nobody can beat up God. Give me a break. Who would be an enemy of God? Well, the Psalm for Shabbos answers its own question. All who commit evil. Somebody who commits evil in the world is in direct opposition to God. God's identity is wrapped up in righteousness and justice, love and honor, compassion, respect and dignity. Those are the elements of God's identity. And so somebody who subverts those qualities and those behaviors and those endeavors would be considered an enemy of God. And you see how the Psalm for Shabbat, associated with the seventh day of the week, is painting a picture of morality. And then we keep on going. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, you anointed my head with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. Here's the continuation. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. They flourish in our God's courtyards. Righteous people have a purpose, and the purpose for righteous people is to bring righteousness and justice into the world and to live in this world. And when they live in this world in daily acts of righteous and just behavior, they are adorning and decorating God's own backyard, which is our world. In old age, the righteous remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock, in whom there is no flaw. So the Psalm for Shabbat is not only reminding us about God's rest, 6 days, 1 day, it's also reminding us that we have a purpose in our world 7 days a week, 24 hours per day. So Shabbos is not limited to just 1/7 of the week, but Shabbos becomes a motivator for you and me to improve our world with our own behavior. The Baruch Shamar on page 122. Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch omer v'oseh, Baruch gozer umekayim, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov l'reov, Baruch chaylad v'kayom lo netzach, Baruch podeu matzil, Baruch Shemo. We will celebrate you, Adonai, our God, with praise and song. We will extol, acclaim, and glorify you, honoring your name and declaring that you are our sovereign God, the singular one who gives life to the world, the sovereign who is praised and glorified forever and ever. This is your great name. Baruch atah Adonai, sovereign, celebrated with songs of praise. Yachid Chayol Olamim, Melech Mishbachim Afar, Adei Ad Shemo HaGadol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Mulabati Shbachot. Prior to the Ashrei, look now at page 135. In a moment, page 136 is the Ashrei. And Ashrei is one of a number of psalms, and we recite psalms on Shabbos because psalms, number one, they're traditional. Psalms are really the oldest part of our worship ceremony, our worship experience. When psalms are first being constructed 3,000 years ago, it was an expression of the individual and of the community. And then when we start inventing a spoken prayer system, it was natural to take hold of the Psalms from the Bible and incorporate them into a prayer system. And then other prayers were written much later. So Psalms are at the earliest stage of our prayer community development. Here on page 135, we don't really have a psalm. We have lots of different sentences that have been drawn from the book of Psalms and constructed into a wake-up section. Let's just get started and get ready for the Psalms in the morning service, which will lead us to the Baruch Hu and the Shema. So look at page 135, and I'm looking at the next to last stanza of 4 lines. Adonai chose Zion, desiring it as a dwelling place. That's Israel. Adonai chose Jacob, Israel as a treasured people. Adonai will not abandon this people, will not desert the inheritors of divine favor. Israel and Sion are one. And you know, Sion is a poetic name, but the official name of the land of Israel is Israel, and the name of us is Israel. God chose Yisrael as a dwelling place. God chose Yisrael as a treasure. We are united with the land. We're supposed to see ourselves as part of the world, the physicality of the land of Israel and the world itself. And there's a beloved nature to that being chosen, that status of being chosen. Ashrei, page 136. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Yalucha Selo Ashreihom Shekocholo Ashreihom Sharono Elohov Tehillah LeDavid Aramimcha Elohai HaMelech V'avarcha Shimcha Leolam Vod B'chol Yom Avarcheka V'ahalala Shimcha Leolam Vod Gadol Adonai Halal Ma'od, V'li Gedulato Ein Cheker, Dolador Yishabach Masecha, Ugvurotecha Yagidu, Hadar Kavod Hodecha, V'divrei Nifotecha Asicha, Ve'ezus Nor Otecha Yomeru, Ugedulatecha Asaprano, Zecherav Tuvacha Yabiu, V'tzid Katacha Yiranenu, Chanun Vrachum Adonai, Erech Apayim Ugdol Chased, Tov Adonai Lakol, Vrachamav Al Kol Ma'asav, Yoducha Adonai Kol Masecha, V'chasidecha Yevarchucha, Kavod Malchutcha Yomero, Ugavoratcha Yedaberu, Lodia Livnei Hadam Gvurotov, Ukavod Hadar Malchuto, Malchutecha Malchut Kololamim, Omem Shaltacha B'chol Dor Vador. Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol hakfufim. Einei chol elecha yesaberu, v'ata noten lahem et achlam be'ito. Poteach et yadecha, u'masbi'a l'chol charatzon. Tzadik Adonai b'chol derachov, v'chasid b'chol ma'asov. Karov Adonai l'chol korov, L'chol asher yikruhu ve'emet, Ritzon Yirev Yaseh, V'et Shabbatam Yishma V'yoshim, Shomer Adonai et kol ohavav, V'et kol harashaim yashmid, Tehillat Adonai yidaber pi, V'varech kol basar shem kachol elam voed, V'anachnu nevarech Yah, Me'ata v'yad olam, hallelujah. V'anachnu means and we. Anachnu means we. V'anachnu and we, nevarech, will bless Yah, God, me'ata, for now, v'ad olam, forever and ever. Yah is also the suffix of the word hallelujah. Yah is an abbreviation of Adonai. Yah is an abbreviation of the special name written in 4 Hebrew letters. And now you understand this last phrase. We're on page 141. The top of page 141. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Once more. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekodsho, hallelujah, hallelujah, Berki Auzo, hallelujah, 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 Vig Vorotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, Karogulo, hallelujah, 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 Becheka Shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, Benevel Vechinor, hallelujah, 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 Betof Omachol, hallelujah, hallelujah, Beminim Ve'ugav, hallelujah, 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 V'tzil Tzalei Shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, V'tzil Tzalei Trua, Kohan Shamate Hallelujah, Kohan Shamate Hallelujah, Kohan Shamate Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Kohan Shamate Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la 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 la, Ya la la la. Thank you for singing along. On page 145. The lower third on the English side, Nishmat is a poem. I think it emerges from the same theme, or the motivating theme of the last 2 lines of the psalm which we sang, which is that every living thing can and will bless and praise God, asserting the universality of the need for worship. It's the last third, page 145, were our mouths, on the English side, were our mouths. Were our mouths filled with song as the sea, our tongues to sing endlessly like countless waves, our lips to offer limitless praise like the sky, our eyes to shine like the sun and the moon, our arms to spread heavenward like eagle's wings, and our feet swift as deer, we would still be unable to fully express our gratitude to you, Adonai, our God, and God of our ancestors, or to praise your name for even one of the myriad moments of kindness with which you have blessed our ancestors and us. On page 147, the little first red arrow, shochen ad. Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv rananu tzadikim baronoi Laisharim Nova Tehillah B'fi Yesharim Tit Halal Ubedivrei Tzadikim Tit Barach Uvilshon Chasidim Tit Ramam Uvekerev Kedoshim Tit Kadash Over Makalot, Rivavot, Amcha Beit Yisrael. Lahodot, Lehalel, Leshabeach, Lefaer, Leromem, Lehader, Levrech, Lalel Kales. Al kol divrei shiro b'tish b'chot David ben Yishai Avdecha Meshichecha. The top of 148, Yishtabach. Yishtabach Shimcha Lo Ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech Hagadol v'Hakadosh B'Shamayim u'Ba'aretz Ki lecha no'eh Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu Shir u'shvacha Halel b'zimra Ozu memshala Netzach gedula Ugvura Tehillah v'tiferet Kiddusha u'malchut Brachot v'orot me'atav yad olam Baruch Adonai El melech gadol b'tish b'chot El ahodot Adonai niflot Habocher b'shirei zimra Melech elchei olamim. We rise, please, the bracha, the top of page 150. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Yotzer or vorech choshech Oseh shalom Uvoreh et hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, forming light and creating darkness, bringing harmony while creating all. We are seated. Somebody asked me what the Baruch Hu is all about, and I was about to say the Baruch Hu is a blessing over light and darkness, and then I corrected myself. It's easy for me to slip into that pattern of saying the bracha of is a blessing over, like the hagafen is a blessing over wine, and the hamotzi is a blessing over bread, and that's wrong. And you know I love ice cream, and the sha'akol is not the blessing over ice cream. The sha'akol is a blessing over God for creating ice cream. The hagafen is a blessing over God for bringing grapes into the world such that we can manufacture wine. The hamotzi is a blessing over God for bringing the raw materials into the world such that we can create bread and we can sustain ourselves and feed those who are hungry in the world. Every bracha, baruch atah, that we Jews say is over God for something that you and I appreciate and benefit in this world. When you and I get lazy and we fall into the routine that people who speak English say the blessing over food, we are losing a connection between ourselves and God. And our ancestors called for us to assert this connection repeatedly. That's why we have so many burchatas in the book, so that you and I are in a constant state of awareness that you and I are as close to God as we can see ourselves as being. That's how close we are to God, this close. And anytime you and I say Baruch Atah, you and I are immediately in a close and intimate dialogue, a personal relationship between the Creator of the universe and yourself. Don't lose that the way I might when I slippingly say, in a lazy manner, the blessing over. Every Baruch is a blessing over God. And we just bless God for creating the beauty of the universe. And look at these windows, these stained glass windows with this light pouring in. And our sanctuary is bathed in color. And a reminder to those who are joining in at home, we are socially distant in the large sanctuary. Feel free to come in wearing a mask, sitting somewhat apart, but we do need your presence. And we continue now on page 154. The top paragraph. You've loved us deeply, Adonai our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Ovinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you, and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us. Open our hearts so that we may understand, and with love, discern, hear, and study, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah. With love, enlighten our eyes with your Torah. Attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope. As we trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name, we will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. Those wearing talis, gather the four tzitziot together. It takes a moment of effort to reach out and pick up a piece of fabric and hold strings. It's emblematic of more than just a moment of effort to reach out and to take hold of somebody else, a Jewish person who is on the outskirts. That's what this is all about, reminding us that in order for us to fulfill Shema, we need to reach out to Jewish people on the outskirts and bring them in. The bottom of 154. B'havi'enu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyut le'artzenu ki el poel yeshuot ata uvanu v'charta mikolam b'lashon v'keraftanu l'shimcha hagadol selah be'emet l'odot lecha ol yachercha b'yahava Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema on page 155. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. V'ahavto et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shachbecha v'kumecha u'kishartam lo'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'sharecha. The middle of page 156. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor taber el bnei Yisrael v'marton lehem v'yasu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam ben adnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til techelet v'yalachem letzitzit וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תעתורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם. למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. You might ask, why do we have Talit in the first place? And one of the many reasons is found here in the last 2-3 lines. V'item kadoshim. Looking at these tzitzit, remember that each of you, as a member of the household of Israel, is to be holy. Nobody else wears these garments. No one else has these fringes. Only the Israelites. And it says right here, I'm God your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And we're reading that in this week's Torah reading. And right now, in just a few minutes, we'll be reading this parsha of the Exodus of Egypt. So an element is to remember our history from whence we came. But it's not only passively remembering history of, oh yeah, I remember that. It means to take hold of history and to transform the present with the charge to bring holiness in terms of mitzvah and righteousness and decency in terms of humanity into our daily lives. That's why we wear tzitzit. On page 157, the bottom 3 stanzas on the English side. Blessed are the ones who attend to your mitzvot and place your teaching and words on their hearts. Truly you are the ruler of your people, Almighty Sovereign, who takes up their cause. Truly you are at the beginning and you will be at the end. Aside from you, we have no ruler who can redeem and deliver. In the center of page 158. Mi chamocha poelim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, norati lot ol seifelet, shira chadasha, shibchu geulim, l'shimcha sifat hayam, yachad kulam hoduvim lechu v'yamro, Adonai imloch la'olam bo'ed, tzur Yisrael, kuma b'ezrat Yisrael, v'dechenu mecha Yehuda b'Yisrael, go aleinu Adonai tzavot shemo, Kiddush Yisrael. We begin aloud on pages 159 and 160, and we continue in silence until 166, or offering a silent private prayer. For those at home, you may be familiar with the fact that we have a phonetic introduction, the transliteration of 159 and 160 found here at the very end of the Siddur. It's page 466. That's the phonetic, if your Hebrew is a little rusty, as we begin 159 and 160. And a reminder, we've been practicing taking 3 small steps. The Hebrew phrase is Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, which means God, open my lips. Forward, Ufi Yagid Tilatecha, let my mouth come forth with words. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. That's actually in a whisper. I'm whispering to myself. You're whispering to yourself. Let me get ready for prayer. And then we begin aloud. So once more in a whisper, and we'll go right into the Amidah. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagi Tilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu V'imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gamel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava Melech Ozer Ufoket Umashiach Umagen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ufoket Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechaye Meitim Atah Rav Lahoshia Mashiv Haruach Morid Agashem Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechaye Meitim Berachamim Rabim Samech Noflim Verofech Olim Omatir Asurim Omekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Micha Mocha Bal Gevurot Omeda Melach Melech Meimit Omechaye Omat Meach Yeshua V'ne'eman Atalachayot Meitim Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye HaMeitim. page 168. Page 168. En kamocha Elohim Adonai v'en kamasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai moloch Adonai yimloch li'olam voed Adonai oz lamo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, av harachamim, eitiv avertzoncha et Zion, tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki v'cha levad b'tachnu, melech el ram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Please rise. Vayehi bin Soah Haaron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, Ve'afutzu oyevecha, Ve'yanusu mifanecha, mipanecha, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, U'devar Adonai Mirushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, La'amo Yisrael, B'kedushato. Before Bein HaRachetz on page 170. Ribbonu Shel Olam, creator of the universe, see the brokenness within the hearts of many within our beloved United States. See the fractures which have taken hold these past months and longer. Give each one of us the strength to open her heart to someone, a fellow, who may be just a bit different, and recognize the beauty of that someone. And may this courage spread from one person to the next. And may we be more inclined to continue to build a shared society than to tear it down. Let there be fewer and fewer episodes of hostility and conflict of American against American. Let this moment begin a momentum of progress and growth for all of us. And we say Amen. The bottom of 170. Be'on harachetz v'lishmei kadisha kadisha yakira ana emar tushbechan be'on harachetz v'lishmei kadisha kadisha yakira ana emar tushbechan yehera avakadamach דתפתח ליבי באורייתו, ותשלים משאלין דליבי, וליבא דכל עמך ישראל, לטוב ולחיין ולשלום. Amen. Page 171. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Tin Ramama Shmo Yachdav. Lecha Adonai HaGedula v'Hagavura v'Tiferet v'Hanetzach v'Hahod ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz Adonai hamamlacha v'minaseh l'chol rosh Romemo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachabu L'Hadam Raglav Kadoshu Romemo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachabu Le'har Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Tanat Ariel. May be seated. We are reading Parshat Bo. If you have the Chumash at home, we are on page 387. If you don't have an Eitz Chaim, a Tanakh, instead, you would be looking at Exodus chapter 12, verse 29, 12:29 in the book of Shemot, book of Exodus. And this is the famous Parsha, which is the conclusion of the 10 plagues. When I was growing up as a child, my first exposure to the 10 plagues was looking at the Haggadah on Seder night. And in our Haggadah, they were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I thought, oh, they must be numbered. I began to study Torah. Guess what? They're not numbered in Torah. And they're not even in the same Torah reading. The first 7 are in last week's Torah reading, and then the next 3, for the total of the 10, are in this week's Torah reading. So the Torah itself doesn't view them as items on a list neatly on page 14, let's say, in your Haggadah. Not by a long shot. There is obviously a great deal of back and forth and conversation between Moses and Pharaoh, and Moses says yes, and Pharaoh says no, and then he twists his arm, and then finally says okay, then he changes his mind, and all that goes on largely in last week's and this week, and a little bit in this week, and the conclusion of this unit sees us actually walking out of Egypt. And because this is such a momentous parsha, we do not have minyan in the house, but I'm going to read the entire Torah reading for the day, because we have to see the drama before us unfolding. So we'll begin on page 387, and the phrase on page 387, at the top of page 387, is chapter 12, verse 29, is Vayhi b'chatzi halayla, And Chatzi means half. Chatzi halayla means midnight. And of course, we're aware that we have a Seder at home at night. All the Sedarim that you've ever participated in have been at nighttime. And that's because we are reenacting the Exodus, which takes place at night. The word is Laila. And the word Laila appears 3 times in the opening 3 sentences to emphasize that we are walking out at night. Vahi v'chatzi halayla, and behold in the middle of the night, is a very famous phrase. It's this week's Torah reading. And also, if you get to your Haggadah and you've had the meal, and you've done the Dayenun and so on, you're getting ready to finish up, after the benching, the grace after meals, near the very end, there's a very long poem which begins with this phrase, and behold, it was in the middle of the night, Vahi b'chatzi halayla. Most people skip it because it's a lot of Hebrew, and by then people are tired. But this phrase, Vahi b'chatzi halayla, behold, it was in the middle of the night, just captures the intensity of this experience. It's been a year since the plagues began. And finally, the Israelites are leaving. And when do they leave? At midnight. Vahi b'chatzi halayla v'Adonai hika kol bechor b'Tzitzrayim mi-bechor Paroi yoshev al kiso ad bechor shvi asher b'veit habor v'chol bechor behema v'yakam Paro layla hu v'chol avodav v'chol Mitzrayim v'titzak hagadol b'Mitzrayim ki ein bayit asher ein sham meit v'yikra leMoshe ol Aaron layla b'merkumutzu mitoch ami gamat Gamade Israel, Volechu, Ivdu et Arnoi Kadabrachem, Gamtunhem Gabakorchem, Kachuka Shedi Bartem, Volechu, Viraktem Gamoti. And as the people of Israel are being told by Pharaoh and then subsequently Moses and Aaron, prepare to leave, we're now looking at verse number 33. And the entire nation of Egypt is getting caught up in this momentum. Quick, everybody, get out the door. And so the Egyptians as individuals are talking to the Israelites as individuals. Here, go, get out, get out. And the Israelites, they've been there for 210 years as slaves. And here they're running out the door. And they don't have anything prepared because it's immediate, it's abrupt. And the Israelites ask, by the way, I've always liked that, size 42 regular jacket that you've got. And, or by the way, that green coat would really go good. And here, take it, and just get out. Here, just go, get out. Because the Egyptians are afraid they're all dying. There's not one house that doesn't have at least somebody who's already died. And so they want to be rid of the Israelites. And that's here in the next aliyah. And within the momentum of the Exodus, and this is found on page 388, verse number 38, 388, verse 38 of chapter 12, a whole bunch of other people go up as well. That's called the Erev Rav, a mixed multitude. ותחזק מצרים על העם למהר לשחם מן הארץ כי אמרו כולנו מתים וישא את בית צקות טרם יחמץ משאר אותם צרורות וסמלתם על שיחמם ובני ישראל עשו כדבר משה וישאלו ממצרים כלי חסד וכלי זהב ושמאלות פרנן נתן לכם בני מצרים וישילום וינצלו את מצרים ויעשו בני ישראל מרמסי סוכות כ600,000 רגלי הגברים לבד מיטף, וגם ערב רב עלה איתם, וצאן ובקר מקנה כבד מאוד, ויפות הבצק שהוציאו מצרים, וגות מצות, כי לא חמץ, כי גרשו מצרים, ולא יכלו להתמחמח, וגם צידה לא עשו להם, ומשה בני ישראל אשר ישבו במצרים 30 שנה ו400 שנה, וימקד 30 שנה ו400 שנה, ויהי בעצם היום הזה יצאו כל צבאות אדוני מארץ מצרים, ליל שימורים הוא לאדוני להוציאם מארץ מצרים, הוא הלילה הזה לאדוני שימורים לכל בני ישראל לדורותם. Some of us know the word door, or the phrase dor lador, which means from generation to generation. And this last little phrase that just concluded ended with the phrase ladorotam, for all the generations. And that's what we've done. We have perpetuated for the past 100 generations, 30 years a generation. For the past 100 generations, 3,000 years, the telling, the retelling, the re-experiencing, the reenactment of the Exodus. You just heard the word matzot, matzahs, and you know that on the holiday of Pesach we eat matzah. We don't eat regular breadstuffs, regular ordinary food items. We're very careful what we eat. Ki lo yachlu, because they couldn't have time to even prepare bread and let it bake normally. They had to rush out. That was found here in the phrasing. So our entire history is being condensed into the few-hour experience of the Passover Seder. We're supposed to see the Seder not only as a time when we lift up a glass of wine and eat the matzah and the maror and the charoses, but we're supposed to see it as literally being in our history. We were walking out of Egypt during the Seder. And that's why we have to read this passage here. So the next passage is on page 389, verse number 43. And frankly, I think this is kind of a curious phrase. I think we need to talk about it for a moment. It's verse number 43. This is the law of the Passover offering. Remember, Pesach in its origination, the Hebrew word Pesach, which becomes Yiddishized to Pesach. Pesach is the name of the lamb. It's the nickname that every Israelite household was supposed to eat a portion of on that Seder night. And we remember the Pesach, the lamb, by having a bone on the Seder plate. Some people call it a roasted shank bone. It's called the zeroah in Hebrew. So this is the law of the Pesach. No foreigner shall eat of it. If you're not an Israelite, you can't eat of the Pesach. Verse 44. But any slave a man has bought may eat of it once has been circumcised. That refers to a later point in history. Israelite law allowed Israelites to own slaves for a short term, and then they had to free them after they'd worked off their servitude. But if an Israelite owned a slave, and that slave was inclined to eat the Pesach, that slave had to be circumcised. Why circumcision? Let's keep going for just a minute. No bound or hired laborer shall eat of it. If you've got just people on the ranch or the household, they can't eat the Pesach when people show up for gathering on the 14th of Nisan. Verse 46, it shall be eaten in one house, not taking any of the flesh outside the household. Don't have a picnic. Don't wrap up leftovers. Don't go see your, Aunt Susie or Uncle Bob or whatever and say, hey, let's eat together. No. It's in this house, this community, Israelites only. Why? Because the Pesach identified the Israelite households, family to family to family, household as household, leaving the land of Egypt. It is the number one key identifier. And who were the people who had been enslaved because they were of a certain identity? The Israelites. What represents being an Israelite? Being circumcised. And that's why it's made very clear that only Israelites, only people within this socio-communal group are to have the Pesach, to reenact the Exodus, and no one else, because nobody else was in their shoes, their sandals, you might say. And keep going, if you look at page 390, verse number 47, the whole community of Israel shall offer it, shall have the Pesach. And this is speaking of in the time period of the Torah, again, immediately during and after the Exodus. Verse 48, if a stranger who dwells with you would offer the Passover to the Lord, all of his males must be circumcised, which means that if there's a non-Israelite living in the neighborhood of Israel, now in the land of Israel, after the Exodus, Joshua's here, we're in the promised land, everybody has the white picket fence, 2.4 kids, a camel in the garage, everything's all situated, we're living in Israel, we're all Jewish, okay, fine. And if a non-Israelite wants to participate, then he and or all the males in his household have to be circumcised. Once you're living in your land, and you're now decades after the Exodus, remember that it was your specific community that had been enslaved and your specific community that had been freed for the Exodus. Now let's fast forward to 3,000 years, to our time period. And you and I know that we often have family members and friends who may not be Jewish, and they join us for Passover. And that's an important thing because we are demonstrating who we are as people, and we're sharing our traditions and our heritage. That makes sense. But at this point in time, it was seen as the key defining feature only for Israelites. And that's why the Torah mentions so many times in this passage, for these people who were walking out the door, this was their July 4th, 1776 experience. So you had to be part of the group only. You couldn't participate if you were outside of the group. And I want that to be very, very clear. And now look at end of number 48. No uncircumcised person may eat of it. So this has been said 3 times in this little paragraph. It's very clear. You've got to be, if you're a male. Females obviously are not circumcised. But if you're a male, you've got to be circumcised. Otherwise, you can't sit at the dinner table. Sorry, sit over there. It's not even the kids' table. You're just not coming in the house. You're not coming in the house for Pesach. That's the deal. Now, verse 49. Torah achat yeh la'ezrach v'lager hagar b'tochachem. There shall be one law for the citizen of Israel, and the same law for the stranger who dwells among you. Again, we're talking about in the time period when the Israelites have been settled and encamped in the land. They're all situated. They're paying their power bills monthly, everything. They're living at home in Israel. There's going to be one law. And in the narrowness of this phrase, one law, it applies to if you want to eat the Pesach, which must be seen as a super exciting, delightful ceremony, you've got to be circumcised. Otherwise, you can't eat. However, later on, in Jewish tradition, we Jews take hold of the sentence of there shall be one law for Israelite and stranger alike, and we expand it. And we take it out of the context of Passover and apply it to our general experience. And the experience is that when it comes to interacting on a daily basis in the marketplace and living side by side, Israelite and Canaanite or so on, there is one law, and the law is righteousness and justice, fairness in the marketplace. We Israelites, we Jews, are commanded to treat non-Israelites equitably in business dealings, in social actions. And in the case of somebody who is ill, or unfortunately, God forbid, somebody has died, we Israelites are supposed to reach out to non-Israelites and offer support. We would say, financial support, emotional support, personal support, caring. We're supposed to visit the sick and take care of those people in need, and so on and so on. Fascinatingly, I love this. There's a segment, it's not Mishnah, it's called Tosefta, but it's the same time period, 2,000 years ago, that there were expectations that if somebody was poor and he needed to be buried, Jewish people were supposed to raise funds for the non-Israelite who was poor and needed a proper burial. So we took hold of this element of one law there shall be, which was initially associated with the Pesach, took it entirely out of context and applied it to a broad understanding as our lives began to change. And you and I know that over the course of history, life changes. And I'm going to jump a little bit. I want to jump to, let's say, page 392, verse number 9. This is on the heels of the summary of the paragraph talking about matzah, matzah, matzah. Eat matzah all week long during the holiday Passover. Verse number 9, eat matzah, don't have any chametz, no leavened bread. Eat matzah over and over again. Why? Verse number 8, you shall explain to your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I went free from the land of Egypt. And that phrase, of course, leaves the Torah reading and goes into the Haggadah. And verse number 9, and this shall serve you as a sign on your hand, as a reminder on your forehead, in order that the teaching of the Lord may be in your mouth, that with a mighty hand the Lord freed you from Egypt. A reminder on your hand and on your forehead. What is that? That's tefillin. And normally we think of tefillin, because we learn about it in the Shema itself, as associated with prayer. We put this little box on our arms and a little box on our head, and inside the little box are some paragraphs of prayers, excerpts from the Torah, and we say it with our prayer, not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov, not in Jewish holidays, days of the week, but we usually associate it with the fact that it's mentioned in the Shema. But here, tefillin is not talking about the Shema and daily prayer. Tefillin is talking about the importance of matzah, the importance of freedom from slavery. So it takes an entirely new cast. Freedom from enslavement means that you and I, each as an individual, can walk into the daily life experience and conduct personal affairs with no coercion, and we can live as free people. And now you know why freedom and Passover is so important, because from a theological point of view, we as Jews need to be free in order to serve the one true master, and that's God. And you serve God in your way, 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 and I serve God in my way, understanding Jewish tradition through each one having a personal conscience and a personal lens. The theology has to be exhibited only if somebody's free. If somebody's torturing me, then I can't be worshiping and conducting my daily affairs. And that may be why tefillin, which is associated with prayer, here gains a new and additional layer of significance. Nearly finished. Page 393. Remember that there's the firstborn plague, which is a terrifying event to take place, and we as Israelites never derive any kind of satisfaction from the plagues. In fact, we look at the plagues with horror, and that's why on Seder, what do? when we're at our meal, we have a glass of wine. It's a feast, it's a goblet. And what do? We dip some wine out of the goblet as we remind ourselves and mention the plagues in sequence. And if you use a spoon or a finger, you know you're not supposed to lick your finger or lick the tip of the spoon, because we don't gain any benefit as we remove a little bit of our joy from our celebratory goblet. Bearing this in mind, the firstborn. Verse 11, and when the Lord has brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as God swore to you and to your fathers, and has given the land to you, verse 12, you shall set apart for the Lord every first issue of the womb, every male firstling that your cattle drop shall be the Lord's. This becomes a very important part in the Mishnah and the Talmud. So 50 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years after the Exodus, if you're an Israelite and you're a farmer and you've got land and you've got cattle, there's Daisy, she's a cow and she has a baby, right? Her firstborn is automatically going to be dedicated to the temple. Automatically. I have no idea how many cows a mama cow will yield in her life. How many cows might a mama cow give birth to over her lifespan? 20? Right, okay. So the firstborn cow or the firstborn sheep automatically goes to the temple. And that's what this sentence is. By the way, if you really want it back, you can pay it off by exchanging it with another animal. But you're supposed to give it to the temple. And that's what this next sentence is, verse number 13. But every firstling ass, that's the ass, that's a donkey, you shall redeem with the sheep. Okay, you want the donkey, okay, bring back the donkey, you pay it off with the sheep. I guess it's the going rate. I don't know. I don't really deal with sheep and cows and donkeys very often, right? But if you don't buy it back, you must break its neck. So a firstborn animal, a donkey, and this is 500, 600, 800 years after the Exodus, is still in some way reminiscent of the firstborn loss in Egypt. You're carrying this through into your pocketbook, folks, because if you've got a donkey that you really want to work with, but you haven't paid the right commission to the temple to have access to because it's a firstborn donkey, you end up killing it in a very bizarre way. And chas v'shalom, God forbid, I don't ever want to be involved with this, and I hope nobody is. But again, there's a loss and there's an element of anguish and sorrow and suffering that is woven into the interaction between the farmer and a beast of burden, all because of the 10th plague. And this is happening, again, centuries after the Exodus, and it's got nothing to do with the holiday of Passover. It might be on a Tuesday in October, or whenever the animal was born, or so on. So the trauma, and I use that word very deliberately and specifically, of the slaying of the firstborn is front and center in every Israelite farmer for the rest of time. Just as you and I, 3,000 years later, on the holiday of Passover, pour out wine. So the Exodus is not only something that you and I are experiencing by going to the grocery store and buying a box of matzah and saying, done, it's April. Much more than that. It's in our mind every single day of our lives. Verse number 14. And in time to come, your son asks you, why are you doing this? Your child's going to ask you, why'd you do this, Dad? Again, it's a Tuesday in October. Why'd you kill this animal this way? Or how come you had to pay the fee to redeem one animal with another animal to get it back from the temple? And then the local Israelite farmer is going to say, 300 years, 800 years after the Exodus, you shall say to him, it was with a mighty hand that the Lord brought us out from Egypt, the house of bondage. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord slew every firstborn in the land of Egypt, the firstborn of both man and beast. And therefore I kill to the Lord every first male issue of the womb, but redeem every firstborn among my sons. Side note, if you've heard of the idea of Pidyon Ben, the redemption of the firstborn, that's what's going on here too. A firstborn Jewish baby boy. So if you got a Jewish mama and she has a baby girl, then don't worry about it. But a Jewish mama has a baby boy, the firstborn would ideally be going to the temple. Some of you know our son David, Minette and I, we have son David, and we had a Pidyon Ben, a redemption of our firstborn son, because if the temple were functioning, which of course it's not, David would have to go be an assistant priest somewhere. But that's the redemption ceremony. But the whole point is that we see the exodus of Egypt in the here and the now. Not only with the food at the table, but with our behavior within each family and how each family interacts with every other family in the community. So we'll conclude the Torah reading for today, and now we'll offer a Misha Berach, a prayer of healing for those within our community. And we invite those joining in at home to mention the name of a loved one, along with these mentioned here, during the Misha Berach. Misha Berach Otenu Avim Yisrael V'Tenu Sarov Karachal V'Layel Hivrek Bekochel Amelev Zekolel Et Amelia Rose Bat Amanda Jean Tom McCarthy Tobalea Bat Freda Shira Avot Bat Sarah Wendy Fastman Anna Moret David Shlomo Ben Tovanachum Haim Fan Zach McKiernan Diane Sizemore Sherry Silverwolf Bruce Kahn Yaakov Ben Leora Sheree Singleton Billy Singleton Chana Bat Meredith, Avimoshe Ben Mendelchana, Tom Bastoni, Chaim Usher Ben Mishka, George Patinos, Miriam Babashi, Spencer Babashi, Robin Mayer, LaClaudia Thomas, Elalea Bataviva, Avim Ben Gisha, Yenta Bat Gisha, Chana Serba Peshalea. V'kulam she'nizkarim meherosh hashb'onar. Amen. Almighty God, as you have blessed their mothers and their fathers, reach forward this day in our lives, in this moment, to all who are mentioned today, all who are known in our hearts and known before you. Bring forth your touch, the touch which fashioned the cosmos, and recreate a new reality for each and every person, with healing, with hope. Remove their anxiety, their fear, their concern, and replace it with hope and optimism and courage. Lessen the illness and the ailment and the suffering plaguing them, each and every one of them, and restore them in health and hope and vitality. Bring your touch of wonderment and of healing upon each and every one. And inspire all of us, stand close to those we love, those in need of healing and of health. Heed this prayer on this day and on into the future. And we all say, Amen. We rise now as the Torah is lifted and dressed. Gabriel? Katie, will you dress the Torah, please? Bezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe Remaining standing in the Siddur. A prayer for Israel on page 178. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Gohalo, Borech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, stronghold redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace, guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace, and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. On page 184, the top paragraph, the last 3 lines. Eitz Chaim hi lama chazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yomenu Chadesh Yomenu Kekedem. Please remain standing, page 204. En Keloheinu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkenu, En Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkenu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkenu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheketiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha, Et Ketoret Hasamim. Oleinu on page 205. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'tet gedula le'otzeh reshit, shelo asanu kugoye haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adamah, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'goraleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlochim, hakadosh baruch hu. Shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mimal, u'shchinatu zo v'gavei meromim, hu Eloheinu eino, emet malkeinu evezulato, kakatu b'torato, v'yadata ayom v'ashevota El Levavecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim, Bashamayim Mimal, V'al Haaretz, Mitachat Enod. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz, Bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. In a moment, the Mourner's Kaddish on page 207. On this Shabbat, as a shul, we remember with great love Linda Haskins, Celia Gerhardt Reed, Rebecca Seidel, Jack Enton, Jacob Weinstein, Dora Briskman, Ida Seidel, Harry Rosen, Leah Silverstein, Herman Silver, Alice Morningstar, Bernie Malkov, Jason Young. Are there any other names to mention this evening, today, or at home? If so inclined, those joining in at home are invited to rise at this time to recite a Kaddish for a loved one. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'olma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zaman kari v'meru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach la'alam olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha b'rechu la'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'olma v'meru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. Members of our shul are in homes elsewhere. Members of the Jewish community, not part of our shul, are joining in as well. And we're offering a prayer and love to them. Think of how powerful that is. That here we are in our synagogue, and we're sending a message of hope and of love and of comfort to people in the community, and we don't even know exactly who they are. But we have the opportunity, we have the capacity to share a message of comfort with others. How staggering that is. That's a good thing that's coming out of this pandemic. And of course, it's not limited just to saying Kaddish. Think about it. In your and my daily lives, we all have the capacity in some way to reach out to somebody else and to offer comfort and hope. May we so do. We'll conclude in a minute with the Adon Olam, and then we'll be making Kiddush and Hamotzi here, and perhaps those joining in at home will be making Kiddush as well with bread and with the wine. Reminders tonight, of course, Zoom Havdalah, Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah, and Monday Tanakh is on Zoom at noon. Tuesday, Spirit. The Spirit discussion is, do Jews have to be environmentally responsible? That's Tuesday from 5 to 5:30. Oh, don't forget Adult Hebrew on Zoom. We're nearly finished with the book, so in another 2, 3, 4 weeks, I think we'll be finished with our self-paced adult learning Hebrew on Zoom. By now you've learned that the Mobile Area Jewish Film Festival is going to be only virtual. If you have any questions, you can contact the Mobile Jewish Federation's office. That's the best way of getting connected, signed up for enjoying these films. And there's a serious, wonderful compilation of quality Jewish films that will be spanning a week and a half, but it will be online. It will not be in venues. Traditionally, for the past 20 years, it's been the shul and the temple, and then lately, the past 10, 12 years, the film festival has expanded to be even in various venues on South's campus, which has been a boon, and also the Ben May Library, and student high schools throughout the region, middle schools as well. Unfortunately, because of COVID, and we're not gathering in large numbers, it'll all be virtual this year. But please contact the office, the Federation office. And with that, we'll turn to Adon Olam, and we're on page 211. Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chepzekol, Azai Melech Shimon Ikra Adon Olam, V'yachare Kichlot HaKol, Lavado Yimloch Nara Adon Olam, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hove, V'hu Yeh B'tifara Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chepzekol, Hazai Melech Shimon Ikra Adon Olam, V'hu Echad V'yein Sheni, Lam Shelo L'achbira Adon Olam, B'li Reshit, B'li Tachlit, V'lo Oz V'misra Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chepzekol, Azai Melech Shimon Ikra Adon Olam, V'hu Eli, V'chai Goali, V'tzur Chavli B'yet Tzara Adon Olam, V'hu Nisi Oman Nosli, Menat Kosi B'yom Mekra Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa, V'chepzekol, Azai Melech Shimon Ikra Adon Olam, B'yado Avkid Ruchi, B'yet Tishan V'ya'ira Adon Olam, V'im Ruchi Geveyati, Adonai V'lo Ira Adon Olam, Asher Malach, V'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'cheptza kol azay melech shemo nikra adon olam. Good Shabbos. And as I mentioned before, I love ice cream, and I don't know if you can see my necktie, but years ago I got this and my kids have always enjoyed it because I would love to eat 9 scoops of ice cream, wouldn't I? So gosh, so we'll be making kiddush again, wine or grape juice or whatever you might have at home. And kiddush means to sanctify, to dedicate, to make something with our focus, our minds, and our deliberation of a different quality. That's what Shabbos is all about. So you're invited at home, and we have members in the shul, and they'll be stepping to the table in a moment and having grape juice or wine, and then challah in a bit. Do we have challah for you up here, Gadiel? You got challah? Okay, we're ready to go. So we're making kiddush, and it's Vishamru. Gadiel, you want to take it away?
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'doratam brit olam Beini uven b'nei Yisrael oti li'olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et haaretz Uvayom hashvi Shabbat v'inafash. Okay, therefore God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Sare Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech olam borei peri agafen. Bruchati, thank you, Cindy. Shkoyach. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad it made significance to you. Hamotzi. Shmo. Amen. May this Shabbos be a time of reflection and renewal. May you know that you are loved and cherished. May God watch over you and bless you and all your family and all your loved ones. Litrot until we see each other again.